Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you also to CIfA for hosting this conference and for allowing me to participate. Today, I'm going to be talking about my current MPhil research, which is on Caucasian and Mesopotamian interactions in the Late Chalcolithic and Early Bronze Age. So first of all, where in the world are we? So here is a modern day map to just give us sort of the geographical context in today's terms. So the Mykop Novus Swobodnaya culture, which was around from 3900 to 3000 BC or 2500 BC if you count the later Nova Swobodnaya half, is in modern day southern Russia. The Kora Araxes culture, which was around from 3500 to 2500 BC, is in the modern day states of Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, northeastern Turkey, and later they spread out more into parts of Lebanon, Israel and Palestine, Syria, and northern Iran. And finally, the Uruk culture, which was around from 4000 to 3000 BC, is in what is today Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. Here's a few more maps to just, again, sort of give us some context. As you can see on the left, the Kora Araxes in their largest extent is in yellow, and Uruk at its largest extent is in pink. And on the right, you can see that Mykop Novus Swobodnaya at its largest extent is in yellow. Again, here's another map. If you can't tell, I really like maps, showing the key archaeological sites that I have chosen as sort of case studies in my research. First of all, it'd probably be important to look at some theories of interaction surrounding Uruk as well as Mykop. And these two theories are the Uruk expansion and the circumpontic metallurgical province. So the Uruk expansion was initially opposed by Guillermo Algaze, and at its core, it's this world systems idea that Uruk is this Mesopotamian core that exploits and controls its peripheral neighbors in an almost coercive way. And they do this by setting up different colonies or trading posts. And the way it works is that Uruk would export agriculture and livestock goods, and the peripheries in return would export raw materials back to the Mesopotamian center. It's generally accepted by most scholars that the Uruk material culture and its people did expand to Mesopotamia's neighbors. However, some people critique this overall model in the sense that it doesn't provide enough agency for Uruk's neighbors. The second idea is of the circumpontic metallurgical province, which was proposed by Yevgeny Chernykh. At the core, this idea is that there are metallurgical provinces throughout space and time that are made up of several foci that share a broad similarity in style and craftsmanship, and that within these foci, there also are shared similar styles and techniques of metallurgy or metalworking. And part of his idea of the circumpontic metallurgical province specifically is that he sees metals moving around the Black Sea and then eventually to the south towards Mesopotamia. Beyond these ideas, why are there thoughts that the Caucasus and Mesopotamia have interacted? Well, there does exist some archaeological evidence for interaction. For example, as you can see here, there's a cylinder seal, and that cylinder seal was not found in Mesopotamia or Anatolia, but rather in a Mykop settlement in the northern Caucasus, today's southern Russia. Additionally, there also exists similarities between pottery in terms of both form as well as in terms of possible technology with wheel-thrown pottery. There's also similarities in between the metalworking and the different weapons made or tools made, their forms, as well as certain types of alloys. For example, a similarity that one can see between Mykop and Arsan Tepe is a copper arsenic nickel alloy. There are also other studies that suggest interaction between the Caucasus and Mesopotamia. For example, some studies point to the fact that the domesticated horse may have been introduced to Mesopotamia through the Caucasus. There's also studies suggesting that wagons and chariots were invented in the northern Caucasus, perhaps the Pontic steppes, and then introduced to Mesopotamia through the Caucasus. And there's also some studies of aDNA, which shows long connections between the Caucasus and Anatolia, suggesting that there was a movement of people, and the movement of people also meant the movement of ideas. And so in my research, to understand if there are interactions, I'm particularly looking at the movement of burial ideology, and particularly if the Mykop type royal burial ideology is moving south. And this can address broader questions of if Mesopotamia really is the core of this far-flung network, and if this network of Mesopotamias does reach even further beyond what people consider the northern periphery of eastern Anatolia. And so, in order to understand if the Maikop royal burial ideology is moving south, there are three components of Maikop burials that I'm using to evaluate the other sites of Arslan Tepe and the Royal Cemetery of Ur. And these three components are the presence of metals, particularly that there is a significant increase in the quantity or quality of metals relative to previous burials. There also has to be the presence of violence, and particularly the use of violence and its materialization to show power. And finally, monumentality. And this is seen through a materialized monumental effort in the overall funerary ritual. So, first of all, the namesake Maikop kurgan. The Maikop kurgan is dated from about 3700 to 3400 BC and is about 10.65 meters high, which would indicate that it took a monumental effort to construct. There is one main burial underneath the kurgan with two other burials in it, as you can see in the diagram. And these two other burials are often considered as human sacrifices of wives or attendants of the person in the main burial. This human sacrifice element does show a sense of violence and power through violence. The Maikop kurgan is also particularly famous in the fact of there is a significant amount of silver and gold and metal objects in general which make up tools and weapons. This presence of a lot of metal shows not only that the Maikop had access to these resources, but they also had the technological know-how to create such objects. And the presence of a large quantity of weapons also speaks to the symbolization and materialization of violence. And the second site I chose for my case study was the royal tomb at Arsan Tepe, which dates to about 3100 BC. There is one main burial, which is in a stone cist at the bottom of a pit. And above this cist, but still within the pit, are four other bodies. And these four other bodies, like at Maikop, are considered to be human sacrifices. Also, like at Maikop, there is a significant amount of metal objects. There's lots of silver and gold objects. And there's also a significant quantity of weapons and tools. This type of burial is really foreign to the region. It's not been seen so far in Anatolia or at Arslan Tepe. And within the burial also, there are pieces of pottery that look like they are from the Kura Araxes culture or perhaps Kura Araxes inspired. And finally, the Royal Cemetery of Ur. This cemetery was in use for a long time. However, the main 16 royal graves date to about 2500 BC, and these graves were considered royal by the excavator for four main reasons. These reasons being that they had a large quantity of metals and other luxurious grave goods. There were death pits, and these death pits are seen as pits of human sacrifice. He also noted that these graves had a very elaborate funerary ritual that probably lasted several days, and that all of these tombs had a stone or brick structure. And so, after having gone over the main points of these burials, where does that leave us? Well, I would argue that all three criteria of the Maikop burial are present at Arslan Tepe and the Royal Cemetery of Ur. In terms of metals, it is seen both at Arslan Tepe and the Royal Cemetery of Ur that there's a significant increase in the amount of metals and also in the quantity of precious metals, as well as the types of objects that are being produced. Technological know-how has increased. In terms of violence, evidence of human sacrifice, like at Maikop, is present at both Arslan Tepe and Ur on a very high scale, considering there are just pits, there are just death pits. Also, at each of these sites, one finds a huge amount of weapons. And I also think that this is sort of a materialization of power through violence. And finally, in regard to monumentality, I believe it is present at all three sites. However, it looks a bit different. Part of this, I think, is just the process of ideas changing over time, as well as being adapted to fit certain cultural systems. For example, Mesopotamians probably don't have the exact same cultural beliefs as those of the Maikop. However, at the core, I still think that the sense of monumentality and putting all this effort into creating a monumental or very long, drawn-out burial, and the manpower and resources needed to put in points to the same ideology, because these people chose to put all of this effort into their burial as opposed to some other sort of building or some sort of works. And I think this can even show further their power and their ability to coerce people into labor to build such big monuments or tombs for them. And finally, although my research is still in progress, I do think that the conclusions and the observations I've made so far can support as further evidence against the idea of a hegemonic Mesopotamian core, and show that ideas and innovations were traveling both ways, not just from south to north, but also from north to south. Thank you so much.